Desmond Bane. He's out for 3 to 4 weeks. Why did you do this to me, Desmond? Desmond Bane. We were so close. We were so close. God, Desmond Bane. Just start the show. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Dry your eyes.
I think I got it together, Damichael. I think. Oh, Desmond Bane. No.
It's tough. Okay.
Take
your time.
Be brave. Be a brave boy. Be a brave. Desmond wants you to be brave. Joe. Welcome to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your one of your hosts, Joe Mullinax here, and I apologize for losing my composure there to start the show. Before I introduce my much more composed co-host, I do want to remind you that we are a member of the Locked On Podcast Network, and you can find us here anywhere you get your podcasts. You can find us on YouTube, rating, reviewing, subscribing. However you listen and watch podcasts, you can find us. And we're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day, and your team's the Memphis Grizzlies. And Damichael, I'm just so upset because they were so close to being healthy. Zaire Williams comes back and Jaren is back. And then, right as I finished the show yesterday, the news comes out and Desmond is out 3 to 4 more weeks. Desmond, that means Damichael, it means he's gonna miss Christmas.
It's tough, Joe. It's tough, Joe. Look at the positive side. In these situations, you got to let people see the positive. Okay. Positive is it's not a grade 3 sprain.
True.
It's true. He's not going to be out to the All-Star break. The Grizzlies are in second place in the West right now.
That's true.
It's 3 to now. I shouldn't say this. This may make you cry more, but you do have the Hawks and the Bucks and the Warriors and the Suns and the Nuggets all coming up.
That's not going to be easy
without Desmond Bane, and it's going to be tough. I'm not too high on them throughout this stretch coming up, but I mean, the Grizzlies have played better without Desmond Bane as of late. They've won 4 consecutive games without Desmond Bane after starting 1-4 with him. So, Joe, see the positives, Joe. See the positives.
You're helping me. You're helping. Thank you so much. You're just so wonderful, Damichael Cole of the Memphis Commercial Appeal, with your beat writing on the Grizzlies and just your wonderful haircut and your hoodie. It just you look great. I think that you're onto something in terms of positivity. The team is playing really well. On the episode prior to this one, I flew solo and I talked a lot about defense and rebounding being one of the keys to the Grizzlies turning this thing around. We were talking before we began recording this episode, and you mentioned the fact that for the first time this season, the Grizzlies are top 10, both in offensive and defensive efficiency. Which, by the way, is almost exclusively because of Jaren Jackson Jr., which just is in 9 games played, he's basically done that, not by himself, but he's been the catalyst for that change. Yeah. I think it's very fair to say. So you have Jaren back in the fold. You had mentioned on a prior episode that Taylor Jenkins kind of made it seem like it's probably the end of his, rest due to load management sort of things. They don't have any more back-to-backs the rest of this calendar year, I think. So we should see Jaren the rest of December, and that obviously will help. Same thing with Ja, barring some terrible injury to either of them, knock on wood, wherever it is. You're looking at having those guys for every game for the rest of the month. So at least they have 2/3 of that triumvirate that the Grizzlies have kind of formed between Ja, Dez, and Jaren. And I am encouraged by the way that players like Zaire Williams, who I know we'll talk more about later in the show, he struggled offensively, but I talked about how he looked really fluid. He was moving well. The team is getting relatively healthier. And obviously Dez is the exception to that at the moment, and Jake LaRavia to a lesser extent. No offense to Jake. Obviously, we want him to get well, but Desmond Bane's on a different plane in terms of his contributions to the team. So Desmond Bane is going to be missed, and I think they're especially going to miss him during that stretch of games that you mentioned a moment ago. But I am fake crying pushed aside. And I am an excellent actor. All of you are exactly right. Those of you that are listening, yeah, I did sound like I was crying. You're right. It was wonderfully done. Is there a Locked On award show, Damichael? You've been around longer than me. Is there like a best actor or best scene from a podcast?
They should create one.
Yeah, okay.
For you. You just had
I'll reach out to our bosses. I'll have my people call their people.
Channeling your Adam Sandler, your Russell Crowe. I like it.
I'm more of a fatter Vince Vaughn. That's kind of what I'm going for.
Okay.
A pudgier Vince Vaughn, a husky Vince Vaughn, perhaps. But anyway, before this completely goes off the rails, Damichael, I'm curious, looking at the way that the roster kind of is shaping up. And again, we'll talk more about Ziaire here in a moment. So maybe this is something we better serve for later on in the show. But who do you, long term, being the rest of December, essentially, assuming we don't see Dez for the rest of December? It's possible we do, but they didn't make it sound like that was likely. Do you stay with Konchar as that starting two? Do you give Ziaire that look? To me, I would keep Konchar where he's at, and I would keep Ziaire in a reserve role, because that's why Ziaire is going to be when the team's fully healthy. Again, no offense to John Konchar. He's having a better than expected, at least for me, season so far. But I think that Ziaire, in terms of the ultimate goals of this team, being an NBA Finals contender, getting out of the Western Conference, Ziaire is going to be more meaningful to that, and I want him to get comfortable in that reserve spot. Konchar, being a more veteran player, of course, as well, he has a little more malleability to his game, and I think he can slide back into a bench role when Dez comes back more easily than Ziaire could kind of start and stop. Okay, for 3 weeks I'm a starter, and now I'm back on the bench. So I think I'd keep Konchar, as crazy as maybe that sounds. And folks that have been following the show since I've joined, maybe their minds are blown a little bit that I'm giving John Konchar his flowers to an extent. But I think I'd keep the mighty Jitty Conch in the starting two spot with Bane out. How do you feel about that?
For now,
sure.
I think that is what will happen right now. And we'll talk more about Ziaire in a second, but so I'll specifically focus on John Konchar here. He knows his role. He's not a guy who you're gonna worry about saying, why is he taking that shot? I mean, I can't think of too many times over the past couple seasons where I've ever said, why in the world is John Konchar taking that shot? It hardly ever happens. He knows his role really well. He's going to take open shots. Sometimes he takes those transition opportunities, those 3-point shots. And a guy like Joe has been begging for him to take some of those shots. So That's good to see as well. But I think, he's growing in this role even more. You're seeing he's starting to pick his opportunities where he takes his shot within the flow of his own rhythm rather than the flow of, the offense sometimes. And I think that's a big indicator of someone's confidence, right? Like, there's taking shots when you're wide open in the corners and no one's guarding you. And then there's taking shots when you get the ball in transition and then you take 2 dribbles and then no one's in front of you and you pull up, those type of shots. And that's where we're seeing him do more of those and just create more opportunities for himself in that way. Not necessarily create the way Ziaire Williams can, but create in that way. So I think with John Konchar, he's played sound defensively. You talk about him, as a defender, he doesn't have like the longest arms in the world or he's a
much better team defender than he is one-on-one on ball.
He's sound. And when you talk about sound defensive guys, you're talking about guys that are they know how to scramble. We see the Grizzlies, they do a lot of scramble style defense.
And that is a strength of Konchar's.
That is a big strength of Konchar. That's when guys trap you. I mean, when you're trapping a guy and then you got one guy like John Konchar may have to guard 2 guys and he has to split the difference in between the spacing and things like that. Those little small intricacies there, John Konchar is really good at that. And then he's really, I think, something that he's special at is just knowing who's behind him defensively. Very, very, it's one of those succinct skills that a lot of guys just don't have, because at the end of the day, some guys are going to say, look, I don't care who's in front of me. I'm going to try to keep him in front of me. John Konchar will say, And instead of trying to keep this guy in front of me and picking up a ticky-tack foul, Jaren Jackson Jr. is behind me. I'm going to force him exactly into Jaren Jackson Jr.'s direction. And if he wants to want to go past me on the right, so be it. Go to the right. And next thing you know, Jaren Jackson Jr. is collecting a 5-block game. So that is something that he's really good at as well.
You're exactly right. I agree with you remarkably, not because I think you're wrong all the time, because you're very right and very smart. But I think it has more to do with just being on the same page about John Konchar. I got to give the guy his credit. He is, in my opinion, a liability in on-ball defense, which maybe we can talk more about on another episode. But in fairness to him, he shouldn't be asked to be doing what he's doing, and he's doing what he is doing well. So kudos to Konchar. I think he's earned that spot. And like you said, for now, that's an important distinction to make. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Masterclass. With Masterclass, you can learn from the world's best artists, icons, and leaders anytime, anywhere, at your own pace. You can learn how to do a variety of things, like the art of negotiation from Chris Voss, songwriting from John Legend, the power of personal branding from Kris Jenner, using the voice as an instrument from Mariah Carey, cooking from Gordon Ramsay. It really is impressive, the list of classes that you can take as part of Masterclass. With over 180 classes from a range of world-class instructors, that thing you've always wanted to do is closer than you think. I highly recommend that you check it out. This holiday, give the perfect gift of an annual Masterclass membership and get one free. Go to masterclass.com/lockedon today. That's masterclass.com/lockedon. Terms apply. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is also brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. What does that mean? That means that you need to check out LinkedIn Jobs, where they can help you find the right people for your team. You add your job, the purple hashtag hiring frame, to your LinkedIn profile, and you spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so that you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. Listen, it's the end of the year. It snuck up on us here, Damichael. It is the concluding month of 2022. You want to finish this year strong. Finding the right team member can help you do just that. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. On yesterday's episode, Damichael, I talked about rebounding and defense, and offense gets the glory and is more sexy, but the things that are going to get the Grizzlies to an NBA championship are those two items, in my opinion: playing elite defense, which they have done since Jaren's returned, and team rebounding. I'm a big fan of that. I think 8 Grizzlies grabbed at least 3 rebounds in the game against the Thunder. More of that, please, right? Crashing the glass as a unit. I like how Taylor Jenkins prioritizes that. I also talked about how even though Zaire Williams didn't have the strongest offensive return to form, and you got to remember Jaren didn't either. His first game back was not particularly strong offensively, and then he went off for 25 in his second outing. Maybe Zaire will have something similar happen to him tonight against the Pistons. But I was impressed with the fluidity of his movement. When you're coming off of a knee injury like that, you can, what I'm watching for, because I have an athletic background, obviously not professional like the NBA, but I'm around athletes enough that when somebody's coming off of that type of knee injury, I'm worried about their lift. I'm worried about their gait, how they move. Are they favoring it? Are they able to leap? Are they able to do the things that they did prior to the injury, having watched Zaire play a decent amount of basketball? And you were there in person, so you can maybe speak to this better than me. I was impressed with how he did in terms of his physical movement. I thought he looked very much like the Zaire of old, and that's a credit, obviously, to Zaire in terms of taking his rehab seriously, but it's also a credit to that Grizzlies training staff that we at times give a hard time to, ultra-conservative Grizzlies training staff, but they're close to batting 1,000 in terms of these guys coming back from these ailments, and they look just as good, if not better, than they did before. Zaire, obviously early in the process, I thought he moved pretty well. What say you?
I thought he moved pretty good too. I think on the layup that he made, his one basket, it was mildly contested, but it was contested enough where, he had to come off the ground and use his left shoulder to shit off the defender and use his right hand to put it up over the defender. So, that was an example right there, the explosiveness that he showed as well in transition. Not only on that play, there were a couple times where the Grizzlies got out and, he was running, didn't get the ball a couple times, but he was running in transition as well. So he looked good to me. I think he looked good defensively. He got one of those ticky-tack fouls called on him when he was guarding Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and he was sliding his feet good. And, he was moving really good and playing great defense. So I think overall he looks good, and I was even more impressed with the positions that he was put in. We talked about last season, right? The big development over the offseason with Zaire Williams was making him more of an on-the-ball threat, putting him in playmaking situations, right? We saw in Summer League, they put him at point guard, for goodness sake. Like, he played point guard in Summer League, and he had some turnovers. Then he had some games where it's like, you know what? He can do this. So all of that considered, that was the big development for him, right? If you go look at Zaire Williams' highlights from last season, I guarantee you 95% of them are going to be either, a spot-up three-point attempt, maybe one dribble pull-up into a mid-range or something like that, or it's going to be a dunk or layup at the rim. No in between, for the most part. But we saw him, get to come off of screens and pick and rolls and make mid-range jumpers and all that in the Summer League. And guess what? His first meaningful, impactful play of the NBA season, he had a pick and roll with Brandon Clark. He had the lowest pick and roll percentage, I think, of like the guards who played a lot of time with the Grizzlies last season. We've talked about it with Ja, Tyus, Dylan Brooks, all of those guys, Desmond Bane. They all get the ball in pick and roll situations where they can either score or play make for teammates. Zaire Williams did not get that opportunity last season. Now, first meaningful play, Joe, he comes off the screen, dumps it off to Brandon Clark, easy basket. So seeing that with my own eyes was like, okay, this isn't no fluke, right? They're putting him in positions to be that playmaking guy where he can score for himself or he can create for his teammates. And that's going to really be a boost to that second unit because, the thing about the second unit right now, who else can you run pick and roll with outside of Tyus Jones? There isn't anyone.
No one. And that's an extremely important point. You mentioned Zaire's defense, and the defense as a whole, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he had 26 points in the game, which if you don't look at the box score, you're like, oh, pretty good night for SGA. Yeah. 17 of those 26 points came from the free throw line, 17 of 19 from the charity stripe, which is a topic for an entirely different episode of Locked On Grizzlies. But the point I'm trying to make is, whether it was Zaire, obviously Jaren, again, is that catalyst that we talked about earlier in the show. David Roddy, I thought, had a good night. Not every time, right? Again, he's a rookie that got cooked every once in a while, but we see Roddy developing on the defensive end, getting more comfortable. Not quite where he should be, perhaps. And again, once the team is healthy, Roddy is the most likely one to fall out of the rotation. But I do believe that we're seeing growth. It's funny. You play NBA basketball and you get better. It's funny how that works. I thought the team as a whole defended SGA really well, and you could easily argue the two worst games of the season for SGA so far have been against the Memphis Grizzlies, which is a good thing to see. It's game plan, it's personnel. I wonder if the Grizzlies are going to see any other big guards along the way on their path to trying to get to the NBA Finals. Oh, there's Luka Doncic that exists, assuming they get back into the hunt. Devin Booker's a bigger guard. I think he's 6'5" or so. So you've got some guys that you're going to have to contend with, obviously. And depending on how you view Zion Williamson, the biggest guard maybe is Zion. So you have some defensive malleability with Zaire in the mix as well, which is extremely important.
Yeah, and that's the big thing with him, right? Because you talk about Dylan Brooks and Zaire Williams when they're on the floor together, because you get going back to your question from the first segment about John Konchar and Zaire Williams. I think we can both agree that Zaire Williams is the more talented player of the two.
Physical gifts, it's not even close.
Exactly. This is a guy who's a 5-star recruit. So he has all of that, in his tutelage. And I think, I'm sure you'd agree to this as well. If Zaire Williams isn't injured, during the preseason, he's starting. I mean, without a doubt, he was a guy who started games last season, and John Konchar, was the 10th, 11th man in those same situations when Zaire Williams was starting, and that was rookie Zaire Williams. So all things considered, I think, the situation has kind of played into that. And I think eventually we could be having that conversation maybe 2 weeks from now when Zaire Williams, again, more of the ramp-up process, more time under his belt. We could have that conversation where we're talking about if Zaire Williams should be moved to the starting lineup. And I'm sure that'll depend on how the starting lineup is performing as well. So there's no doubt about it to me that he is, the type of player who can create his own shot. We talked about the mid-range jumper. We talked about the finishing around the rim. Now you mentioned the defense, right? You're going against all these these guards who are really good shooters. You need long defenders who can kind of, alter their shots a little bit. He's that type of guy. You got Dillon Brooks, who's going to be ultra physical with guys. He's, going to fight through the screens and things like that. And now you have Zaire Williams, who when the shot goes up, guys shouldn't be able to see over him.
Yeah, it'll be very difficult for them at the very least, and that's a good thing. So Ziaire looking healthy is certainly going to strengthen the Grizzlies' current state of affairs. Thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting, info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds over at BetOnline and trends as well for every professional and amateur league that's out there, from football to esports and everything in between. BetOnline has it all. And if you love sports podcasts, chances are if you're listening to this, you do, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix over at BetOnline. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. We will be talking about this Grizzlies team going against the Detroit Pistons once again next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. Damichael, here we are looking at another matchup with the Detroit Pistons, a team going in a different direction than Memphis. Lots of young talent, should be good in the future, but right now they're not really there. It is a game that the Grizzlies should handedly win. Here's why I'm mildly concerned, because I feel like I'm mildly concerned about every game that we talk about.
Mildly concerned, Joe?
I like your reaction. This is good. This is going to be a good last few minutes of Locked On Grizzlies for everybody that stuck around. Mildly concerned. And it's not a rational thought. I want to lead with that. It's not a rational thing, okay? I just know how my brain operates, and I feel like I'm writing about this for my Written in the Dark newsletter that I do now. Okay. We're a lot more like these guys in terms of being human beings, right? The personal aspect. When I see Ja dancing with his daughter on the floor after a game, I think about my kids dancing to Bluey, the Disney show. Mm-hmm. And, I see, Ja's daughter do that, and I see my daughter dancing, right? Which I wonder if maybe you could ask Ja if he likes the show Bluey the next time you ask him a question. Just throwing that out there. I'm not telling you how to do your job, but that's just something that I'm curious about as a fellow father. So anyway, go Bandit, by the way. I'm a big Bandit fan. So I think that what I'm trying to get to is the team has 2 days off after this, right? And they're in the midst of a homestand. So they have a game on Friday, and they don't play again until Monday. So we won't, when next time we're on Locked On Grizzlies, we'll still be able to break this game down. It's not like we're going to have to double dip and talk about 2 games. So I wonder if they look ahead a little bit to a bit of a breather, a chance to be in their own bed and be extended. Again, I'm not saying that it's because they're young or they're immature. I'm not trying to be judgmental. Maybe it's because I'm in the empathetic mood and I'm seeing, I'm going to get to relax a little bit. Maybe they come out slow in that way. So like I said, I'm not saying it's a logical thought to Michael. I'm just reminding people that these guys are human beings, not robots that charge and boot back up for every game at FedEx Forum.
Yeah, but Joe, you know what else human beings have? They have emotions.
That's true.
They're not going to be happy if this is a close game. They're not going to be. And let's rewind back. Let's go back to Wednesday, right? It's Oklahoma City Thunder.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the best team in the world. I mean, you want to talk about getting up for games. I mean, a Wednesday night against Oklahoma City Thunder.
The Thunder are in a similar spot to the Pistons. Sorry to cut you off. The Thunder in a similar spot.
Exactly. So you got Dillon Brooks. Yeah, sure. He should be up. He has Shea, Gilgeous-Alexander, of course. But I'm looking at that game, Joe, and 2 minutes in, Jaren Jackson Jr. is yelling at his teammates, telling them to wake up. Second, third quarter, Jaren Jackson Jr. gives up a couple quick, easy layups. Dillon Brooks is getting on him a little bit. Taylor Jenkins is getting on him a little bit.
You're picking up what I'm putting down here.
I don't think there's going to be some sort of letdown, Joe. I think that was an example more so of the fact that these guys got their foot on the gas right now. I don't see them letting up against a Pistons team that will be undermanned. And now that they've seen, Killian Hayes, who, by the way, has been playing terrific basketball as of late. Killian Hayes, they're not going to underestimate him, I think, which some teams have done lately until he's shooting the ball really well. He guarded. Ja Morant had a great game against the Pistons, but look at it. Killian Hayes guarded him pretty well in that game. He's really good on the ball. He can stay in front of guys. Really solid defensively. Jaden Ivey. What about Jalen Duren as of late? I mean, he will be the Pistons starting center before the season ends.
Absolutely.
I think it's no question if, it's more when, at this point. But he's back at the FedEx Forum. So I can see a little bit why he's at his job, but
there is some precedent.
At the end of the day, if you believe this team is a second seed in the West and they have an all-star point guard and they have an all-star caliber power forward who's playing tremendous defense, even a guy like Dylan Brooks, he's better than most of this Pistons team. Just know you don't play with your food in games like this. This is a 7-20 team. They're in the Vic Wembanyama sweepstakes here.
It's true.
And I mean, you may have like a slow start or something similar to the OKC game, but I expect them to pull away if that's the case. Not looking. I think this is a game where we could see a little bit more of Zaire Williams and let him play free and get more of those minutes.
Memphis, I believe, was up 7 going into the fourth quarter against OKC, and then they had the 14-point dominant final frame to put that game out of reach for the Thunder. I think you're right. Like I said, my concern was not necessarily of logic. It was relating as a human being to having a little extended time and knowing that the opponent coming in was not the Golden State Warriors, was not the Phoenix Suns, was not the New Orleans Pelicans, which they're looking pretty good right now, Damichael. That seems like another topic maybe for an episode next week, taking a look at if New Orleans is legit. And if they are, that makes things really interesting in that Southwest division. So something to discuss in a later episode. But before you can get to those dream matchups, you got to get through the Pistons. And again, I don't mean that to disrespect Detroit. I think that they are in a place in terms of their rebuild where they're acquiring young talent. They're trying to figure out who's going to stick in the league. And obviously they got to play to figure those things out. And Memphis, hopefully they take the opposite approach that what they had in OKC. Like you said, the slow start against the Thunder on Wednesday, they try to blow them out early so they can get the rest of the night off. That would be another human emotional response. Accelerate quickly so you get a little bit more rest time there at the end. That would be a very human way to handle things. Thanks for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today. For your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Damichael, as I mentioned a moment ago, next time we're back together, we'll recap this game. We'll be looking ahead to their next game on the schedule, which I'll be honest, I don't have right in front of me. Maybe you remember better than me. But whoever they play on Monday, I know it's going to be at home. I know that because they're in the midst of that nice homestand.
Yeah, it's the Hawks. So
there you go, the Hawks. Ooh.
No DeJounte Murray. No DeJounte Murray. Remember
DeJounte Murray. That's going to help them a ton.
Murray. Yeah, so that's
getting as many wins as possible with Desmond out. That's a big thing. So I'm sure we'll talk about Trae Young. Maybe you have a take about that drama. I have a take about it, but we're running out of time on this episode, so I'll save that for Monday. But we'll talk about the Hawks, obviously recap this game, and like I said, maybe dip our toes a bit into what's going on in the Western Conference. But for Damichael, my wonderful co-host, have a great weekend, my friend. Enjoy yourself. Obviously working on Friday, covering the Grizzlies game, but hopefully you're able to relax a little bit. A rare thing on an NBA season Saturday night to not have any work to do. That's going to be nice for you.
It's gonna be nice. It's gonna be nice. I got something I'm working on up the sleeve here. Maybe we'll talk about it on Monday. I think
I'm excited.
Something nice I'm working on.
I like that. It's Wake Up, Babe. The new Damichael is out.
Yeah.
New Damichael article. All right, I like it. So there's plenty of reasons for you to come back to this craziness that is Locked On Grizzlies. So thank you so much for sticking with us. Rate, review, subscribe, however you get your podcasts. You can find us on YouTube, comment there, like everything that you can possibly do to help us continue to make this show better. It's appreciated. Damichael and I are hitting our stride, really enjoying doing the show. Hopefully you're checking out our Locked On Now videos as well on Twitter. We're going to start uploading those to YouTube as well. We got some good feedback on those recently, so we'll try to build that up too after games, quick 1-minute recaps after every game that I've taken over since, Damichael's kind of busy after games, in fairness. So I can help him out with that. But we're continuing to expand Locked On Grizzlies. Thank you for making us a part of your Grizzlies experience. For Damichael, I'm Joe. Continue to lock in. This is Locked On Grizzlies.